A poorly planned conspiracy can become a destructive weapon for itself, and if it is planned against influential people, such as the hero of today's story, it can destroy the entire business and the entire lives of customers. The airplane cabin was filled with the hum of engines, the muted chatter of passengers, and the hurried steps of flight attendants finishing final preparations for takeoff. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the galley, adding a touch of comfort to the hustle and bustle. But for Eliza Jones, this flight promised to be anything but peaceful. She had settled into her assigned window seat in row 12, feeling the warmth of the sun's rays streaming through the small oval window. Flipping through her to-do list on her phone, Eliza allowed herself a rare moment to relax after a grueling work week. This trip was supposed to mark the beginning of her well-earned vacation, even though she rarely let go of business completely. Her calm, however, was interrupted as a flight attendant with meticulously styled hair and a professional yet frosty demeanor approached her. The name Caitlin Morris was displayed on her badge, and she seemed to linger by Eliza's seat with deliberate intention. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket, please?" Caitlin asked, her tone cold and detached. Eliza handed over her printed ticket without a word, maintaining her composed demeanor. Caitlin glanced at the ticket, then at Eliza, a faint glimmer of satisfaction flickering in her eyes. "Unfortunately, there seems to be an error with your ticket," Caitlin declared, almost relishing the words. "This seat has been reserved for another passenger. You'll need to move to row 28, near the lavatory." Eliza raised her gaze to meet Caitlin's, her face unreadable. "I have a ticket for this exact seat," she stated evenly. "Unfortunately, this decision comes directly from management," Caitlin replied, stepping back slightly and gesturing toward the rear of the aircraft. Her eyes sparkled with a misplaced sense of authority. Eliza sighed and stood. She knew that a confrontation now would be unproductive. Her calm exterior had often been her most powerful tool, and she wasn't about to abandon it now. Without a word, she walked to the cramped seat near the lavatory, not betraying a flicker of emotion. As she sat, Caitlin flashed a brief, self-satisfied smile before returning to her duties. What she didn't know, however, was that Eliza was not someone who quietly accepted injustice. Speaking softly, with her phone held close to her ear, Eliza dialed the number of her accountant, Linda. "Be ready," she said, her voice measured, her eyes fixed on the seat back in front of her. There was a steely edge in her tone. "I might need to call you again." On the other end, Linda held her breath, recognizing that Eliza's words signaled something significant. Eliza ended the call without offering any further explanation, her mind already calculating her next steps. Around her, the faint hum of engines, passengers' casual chatter, and the clinking of seat belts filled the air. But for Eliza, this was merely the beginning of something much larger. Eliza sat in the cramped seat, her calm exterior concealing the storm of thoughts brewing in her mind. The distant buzz of engines and the faint creak of the airplane's frame seemed to mirror the undercurrent of tension running through the cabin. Around her, passengers whispered among themselves, oblivious to the larger scheme that was unfolding. Further up the aisle, Caitlin Morris exchanged a meaningful glance with the senior flight attendant, William Cox. His sharp, tailored uniform and confident stride marked him as someone who wielded authority on this flight. Standing near the galley, he spoke in hushed tones with Caitlin and Jennifer, another flight attendant, who looked equally uneasy and conspiratorial. "Everything's in place?" William asked Caitlin, his voice low. She nodded, her expression smug. "She's been moved to the back. Now we just wait for the right moment." Jennifer fidgeted, her eyes darting nervously toward the passengers. "Are you sure this is a good idea? She's not just another passenger. This could backfire." William shot her a sharp look. "We have our orders. Do you really want to challenge Mark Redding's decisions? He's made it clear Eliza Jones is a threat to this company's future, and we've been tasked with taking care of it. Do your job." Jennifer swallowed hard and nodded reluctantly. Caitlin, emboldened by William's confidence, flashed a satisfied smile. She adjusted her blazer and made her way back toward Eliza's seat, her heels clicking against the narrow aisle. Eliza, still seated near the lavatory, had pulled out her phone and begun typing a message to Linda. Her fingers moved quickly, her mind racing through the possibilities. She wasn't just enduring these indignities out of patience. This was about strategy. Every move they made was being observed, catalogued, and prepared for future action. "Excuse me, ma'am," Caitlin said loudly as she approached, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Her tone was colder this time, her demeanor sharper. "I'd like to remind you of our rules regarding the use of electronic devices before takeoff." Eliza looked up from her phone, her expression as composed as ever. "Of course," she said softly, placing the phone face down on her lap. Caitlin lingered for a moment, her gaze filled with calculated disdain, before turning sharply and walking away. Nearby passengers exchanged confused glances, sensing something unusual in the interaction. Eliza leaned back in her seat, her mind already piecing together the puzzle. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or a clerical error with her ticket. This was deliberate. But why? And to what end? She wasn't yet certain, but she knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. Further up the aisle, Caitlin rejoined William and Jennifer, who were watching the cabin carefully. "She's not going to make this easy," Caitlin muttered, glancing over her shoulder toward Eliza. "She doesn't have to," William replied with a smirk. "All we need is one slip-up, and if she doesn't make one, we'll create one." Jennifer's uneasy expression deepened, but she said nothing. The tension among the flight attendants was palpable, though it went unnoticed by most of the passengers. Eliza, meanwhile, remained calm and composed. Her phone rested lightly on her lap, its screen dark, but its microphone quietly recording the faint hum of the engines, the muffled whispers of the crew, and every word spoken within earshot. She would have everything she needed, but for now, patience was her greatest asset. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Eliza closed her eyes, letting the rumble of the engines wash over her. Whatever game they were playing, she would be ready. She always was. The cabin was bathed in the dim, cool light that often accompanied the moments before takeoff. The low hum of engines reverberated through the air, blending with the faint murmur of passengers adjusting in their seats. Eliza Jones sat still, her phone resting on her lap, its recording app quietly running. She knew that the calm facade around her was deceptive. This flight was more than just another trip. It was a game being played against her, and the stakes were high. The footsteps of Caitlin Morris echoed faintly in the aisle as she approached Eliza's seat once again. Her forced smile barely concealed the thinly veiled condescension she seemed to enjoy. Nearby passengers watched from the corners of their eyes, sensing the tension but unsure of the cause. "Ma'am," Caitlin said, this time louder and with a sharper tone, "I've received complaints about your behavior. It seems you've been disrespectful to the crew." Eliza turned her head slowly to meet Caitlin's gaze. Her expression was serene, but her eyes carried a sharp clarity that seemed to unsettle the flight attendant. "Complaints?" Eliza asked evenly. "I haven't spoken to anyone besides you." Caitlin's smirk didn't waver. "I would advise you to keep your voice down, ma'am. This is a final warning. Any further disruptions will result in your removal from this flight." Eliza's composure didn't falter. Instead of responding immediately, she reached for her phone and pressed a button, subtly saving the recorded interaction. "I see," she said finally, her voice calm but deliberate. "Thank you for the clarification." Caitlin's confidence seemed to falter slightly as she noticed a few passengers discreetly turning to observe. Without another word, she pivoted on her heel and walked briskly back toward the front of the plane, where William Cox stood waiting with an air of impatience. "She's playing it cool," Caitlin muttered as she joined him. "But it's only a matter of time before she slips up." William's gaze swept the cabin, pausing briefly on Eliza before returning to Caitlin. "Make sure you're ready. If we don't create enough leverage, we'll lose our chance." Jennifer, standing nearby, glanced nervously at the passengers. "Do you think anyone's catching on?" "People are looking." William's tone turned icy. "Let them look. As long as we follow through, it won't matter." At her seat, Eliza was quietly strategizing. Her phone buzzed faintly with a message from Linda. "Call me whenever you're ready." The two had an unspoken understanding, one that had developed through years of partnership. Linda trusted Eliza's instincts, and Eliza trusted Linda to execute her plans with precision. Eliza leaned back in her seat, her thoughts razor-sharp. She wasn't sure how far William and Caitlin were willing to go, but she knew she had the resources and the resolve to counter whatever they planned. For now, she would continue to observe, waiting for the right moment to act. The engines roared softly as the plane began to taxi. The hum of anticipation in the cabin grew, but for Eliza, it wasn't the flight itself that demanded her focus. It was the unfolding plot against her, and she was ready for it. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the hum of engines provided a constant backdrop to the increasingly tense atmosphere inside the cabin. Passengers seemed to notice the subtle but deliberate tension between the crew and Eliza Jones, though they were unsure of its cause. Meanwhile, Eliza sat silently in her cramped seat near the lavatory, her phone still discreetly recording. She had every intention of staying one step ahead. William Cox, standing at the galley with Caitlin and Jennifer, leaned in to deliver his final instructions. "It's time," he said quietly, his voice sharp with purpose. "Make the move. We need this to escalate." Caitlin nodded, squaring her shoulders as she strode purposefully down the aisle toward Eliza. Her polished demeanor returned, but her eyes betrayed the confidence of someone who thought they had already won. Jennifer trailed behind, her hesitation still evident. Stopping at Eliza's seat, Caitlin cleared her throat loudly, making sure to catch the attention of nearby passengers. "Ma'am," she began, her tone colder than ever, "I'm afraid we've received another complaint about your behavior. You've been disruptive and have violated our cabin rules." Eliza looked up, her expression remaining calm and unreadable. She didn't respond immediately, letting Caitlin's accusation hang in the air. The passengers nearby exchanged confused glances, their curiosity growing. "I'm sorry," Eliza said quietly. "Could you please explain what behavior you're referring to?" Caitlin folded her arms, her smirk growing. "You've ignored crew instructions and displayed an uncooperative attitude. For the safety and comfort of all passengers, we're asking you to leave this flight." A soft gasp rippled through the nearby rows as the accusation reached the ears of more passengers. Whispers began to spread, and a few people discreetly pulled out their phones to record the unfolding scene. Eliza sat still, her measured demeanor unwavering. Slowly, she reached for her phone, unlocking it with deliberate calm. "I see," she said, her voice steady. "If that's the case, I'd like to document this interaction for clarity. Could you repeat exactly what I've done to warrant removal from this flight?" Caitlin's smirk faltered, her eyes darting toward the phone in Eliza's hand. "Ma'am, recording is against airline policy." Eliza interrupted her gently. "I wasn't aware of that policy. Could you please show me where it's stated?" Caitlin hesitated, her confidence cracking slightly as the whispers among passengers grew louder. It was clear that more people were now watching and filming the exchange. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in the background, her gaze fixed on William, who stood at the front of the cabin, observing with a tense expression. Eliza's phone buzzed lightly in her lap. Another message from Linda. She glanced down briefly, seeing the words, "Everything's ready. Just say the word." Eliza's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile as she locked the screen and looked back at Caitlin. "Very well," Eliza said, her voice calm but resolute. "If you insist on removing me from this flight, I'll comply. But before I go, there's something I need to share with everyone here." She stood slowly, her presence commanding the attention of the entire cabin. Passengers craned their necks to watch, their phones raised to capture the moment. Caitlin took a step back, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Eliza held up her phone, tapping on the screen to reveal a digital document. She turned it toward the passengers, ensuring the cameras could capture it clearly. "This," she said, her voice ringing with quiet authority, "is a finalized contract. As of this morning, I am the majority shareholder and owner of SkyHigh Airlines. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. Caitlin's face turned ashen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Jennifer froze in place, her eyes wide with disbelief. William, standing at the galley, dropped his clipboard, his expression one of sheer shock. "I was going to wait until after this flight to make the announcement," Eliza continued, her gaze sweeping across the cabin. "But given the circumstances, it seems appropriate to share it now. This airline is under new management. Effective immediately." The cabin erupted into murmurs, disbelief and amazement rippling through the rows. Passengers who had been filming looked at one another in astonishment, their cameras still recording. Caitlin took another step back, her face pale and her confidence shattered. Eliza turned her attention to her phone again, tapping the screen to end the recording. She met Caitlin's gaze directly, her expression calm but resolute. "Please return to your station, Ms. Morris. I'll be addressing this behavior with corporate immediately." Caitlin stammered, I didn't." Eliza raised a hand, silencing her. "I believe we're done here." The murmurs grew louder as the weight of Eliza's words sank in. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, leaving Caitlin, Jennifer, and William stunned and speechless. Eliza returned to her seat, her expression as composed as ever, as the plane continued its journey. The tension in the cabin was electric, the shock of Eliza's announcement rippling through the rows of passengers. Phones were raised everywhere now, capturing every moment of what would soon become an unforgettable scene. For a few long seconds, Caitlin Morris stood frozen in place, her confidence shattered. Behind her, Jennifer looked as though she might collapse under the weight of her own unease, while William Cox's normally sharp demeanor was replaced by utter disbelief. Eliza remained seated, her expression as composed and commanding as ever. She placed her phone down on the tray table in front of her and clasped her hands lightly, as if the chaos surrounding her was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. It was a display of calm that only added to the already palpable tension in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eliza began, her voice carrying across the cabin, "I understand that this might come as a surprise to some of you. Rest assured, this airline will continue operating as usual, but some changes are long overdue. Accountability is a cornerstone of any successful company." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Passengers exchanged glances, the realization dawning on many of them that they were witnessing something historic, something that would undoubtedly be trending on every social media platform within hours. Caitlin finally found her voice, though it wavered as she spoke. This must be some kind of joke. There's no way." Eliza turned her gaze toward Caitlin, silencing her mid-sentence. "Ms. Morris," she said calmly, "I can assure you this is no joke. I would suggest you stop speaking before you further incriminate yourself. I have a complete record of today's events, including your actions and words." Caitlin's face turned pale, her breath catching as she stepped back. Beside her, Jennifer lowered her gaze, unable to meet Eliza's eyes. William, however, took a step forward, his expression hardening as he tried to salvage the situation. "This is highly irregular," William said, his voice sharp. "You can't just—" "I can," Eliza interrupted, her tone cutting through his words like steel. "And I have. Mr. Cox, your behavior, along with that of your staff, is unacceptable and reflects poorly on this airline. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties pending a full investigation." Gasps erupted from the passengers, and the cabin buzzed with incredulous whispers. William's face turned beet red, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to form a response. Eliza gave him no chance, her composed authority leaving no room for debate. "As for you, Ms. Morris," Eliza continued, her gaze now fixed on Caitlin, "you'll also be relieved of your duties. This is not how we treat passengers, under any circumstances." Caitlin seemed to shrink under the weight of Eliza's words. She stumbled back toward the galley, her confidence completely eroded. Jennifer followed silently, her face etched with regret. The cabin grew quieter as passengers absorbed what had just transpired. Then, almost simultaneously, applause broke out. It started as a few claps from the back of the cabin but quickly grew into a wave of cheers and whistles. Phones were still recording, capturing every second of the incredible moment. Eliza nodded slightly in acknowledgement, her demeanor as composed as ever. She leaned back in her seat, allowing the applause to wash over her. The power dynamics had shifted entirely, and she had made her point. Justice had been served, and the balance restored. The buzz from the cabin slowly subsided as the plane continued its flight to Miami. The atmosphere, however, was still electric, with passengers exchanging whispers and glances at Eliza Jones, who now sat serenely, exuding quiet confidence. The shift in the power dynamic had been decisive, and everyone on board knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Eliza, meanwhile, took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her phone, now back in her hand, buzzed with notifications. News of the event had already begun spreading, thanks to passengers uploading videos from the flight. Social media platforms were ablaze with hashtags like #SkyHighShakeup and #ElizaJones. She scrolled through some of the posts, smiling faintly at the outpouring of support. People praised her composure and applauded her for standing against injustice. It wasn't just about the incident. Her actions resonated with many who had faced similar mistreatment in their own lives. After the plane landed in Miami, passengers disembarked, many stopping to thank Eliza personally. Some simply gave her a nod or a smile, while others expressed their admiration more openly. "Thank you for standing up for what's right," one woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. Eliza nodded graciously. "We all have a responsibility to demand better," she replied simply. By the time she reached the terminal, the videos of the incident had gone viral. News outlets had already picked up the story, framing it as a stunning example of leadership and resilience. Headlines read, "Businesswoman turns tables on airline staff," and "Eliza Jones shakes up SkyHigh Airlines mid-flight." Eliza met with Linda and her legal team later that evening. Together, they reviewed the documentation she had gathered, including the audio recordings and passenger videos. The evidence was overwhelming, and Eliza wasted no time in ensuring that justice was served. Within days, SkyHigh Airlines released an official statement acknowledging the misconduct of its crew and promising an internal review to prevent such incidents in the future. The statement also confirmed the restructuring of the airline under its new ownership. Eliza, however, knew that her work was far from over. She used the incident as a springboard to launch a broader initiative focused on improving passenger rights and accountability within the airline industry. Her bold actions inspired countless others to speak up against mistreatment and demand change. As she sat in her Miami office, overlooking the ocean, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The events on the flight had been challenging, but they had also reaffirmed her belief in the power of resilience and action. She had turned a moment of adversity into an opportunity to create lasting change. Eliza turned to her team, her gaze steady. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We're going to build something better, not just for this company, but for everyone who's ever felt powerless. Because no one should have to tolerate injustice." Her words echoed with conviction, setting the tone for what was to come. Eliza Jones had not only reclaimed her dignity but had transformed the very system that sought to undermine her. And in doing so, she had reminded the world that strength and integrity could triumph even in the face of calculated adversity. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.